I have been building VW buses lately, a lot of them, and they're all tiny. Stick around to see if you can get your hands on one. Hey, it's Joe, and welcome back to the Wilson VW Bus Podcast Series, a show dedicated to the Volkswagen Type 2 and all of my crazy adventures. We've been pretty busy around here lately, restoring the rusted sheet metal on Connor's 1962 VW Bug, fixing my own garage, and I've dedicated a bunch of my time to getting back to some of my art projects. The first thing, however, I'd like to tell you about is a new app that I've learned about. Like most of you, I listen to a few other podcasts, and one of them is another Volkswagen-centered podcast called the Brewdub Garage Talk Podcast, featuring a young couple from Florida and their adventures in the VW community. Well, they told me on one of their podcasts about this Van Alert app, which I found quite interesting. It's Van Alert, V-A-N-A-L-E-R-T. It has all kinds of Volkswagen travel help, like contacts for local repair shops if you're out on the road and away from home in your bus and you've got a problem, campsite information. It has contacts for driveway camp host, a stolen bus section so that you can help other bus owners recover their vehicles, a blog, a calendar, news, photos. It's got everything. So if you got a VW bus, you should download this free app. What have you got to lose? During this past holiday season, my wife and I met up with some old friends that we hadn't seen in quite a while, and we went down to Cape May, New Jersey. For those of you that are not familiar, Cape May is a quaint seaside resort town at the southern tip of New Jersey known for its Victorian architecture. I actually lived there when I was a child, and we make an effort to visit there once in a while. We spent the day sightseeing and looking at the old, holiday decorations, checking out a bunch of vintage shops and antique stores. And in one of these stores, I came across an old-looking but new compass. It's maybe 2 inches across and obviously made out of brass or some brass-like material. The compass was reasonably priced. It had a nice leather case that came with it. And as soon as I saw it, I knew it would be a perfect addition for Wilson, so of course I had to pick it up. When I came home, I couldn't wait to figure out how to mount the compass to the dash of the bus. And my first thought was I would use some of the very strong magnets that I have to create a little mount for that. But ironically, I had placed the compass on my nightstand where my earbuds are. And before I went outside, I noticed that the needle on the compass moved drastically away from north. So I knew the magnet idea was not going to work for this mount if the magnets in my earbuds had already thrown it off. So I went into the garage to take a look to see if there was anything else I might possibly have. And while sitting in the driver's seat and looking over at the ashtray on the dash, which of course I do not use, so that would be the great place to mount it, it came to me that I could fabricate a small strap of some sort that would hold the compass case onto the ashtray. I took a look over at the workbench, and there were some small scraps of leather that I had used for the steamer trunk handles that matched the leather compass case. So I took a few measurements, cut a small piece of the leather, and riveted it to the case. I then made some braided chain from some black wax-coated cotton twine that I had, and attached that to the compass and also to the case. Now my vintage navigation system looks right at home on Wilson's dash, and covers the ugly ashtray, so it's a win-win. Check out the old Instagram post if you want to see what that looks like. Of course, it's been a cold, snowy, and miserable winter here in New Jersey, and I am not a fan of the winter months, as you know. I thought it would be about time I cleaned up the mess in my garage that started accumulating when I began restoring Wilson like 5 years ago. I've got parts and pieces laying around everywhere, tools that had no place to be put away, a garage door and a garage window that needed to be fixed at the very least. You see, right before I acquired Wilson, I ripped my entire garage apart, stripping everything off the walls and the ceiling all the way down to the frame and the studs. Then I fully insulated it and heated it and re-sheetrocked the entire garage, painted it, and then Wilson came, and it's been accumulation of work and tools and a big mess. So I figured now would be a good time to start cleaning things up a bit. and I started with the window at the back of the garage. This window just never got the trim molding put back on after I ripped everything off to put the cabinets on the back wall a few years ago. It only took a few hours and a few scraps of 1x3 pine wood, but I finally got around to trimming out the window and cleaning the filthy window blinds and reinstalling everything. What a difference that made to the back of the garage. The next project to tackle was the garage door. I did a few quick repairs to the overhead tracks over the past few years, but the brackets that hold up the top rail have been untouched in over 30 years. I took a few pieces of scrap angle iron and measured out what I needed and welded up a few brackets to secure the garage door track to the ceiling. At this time, I also made some much needed adjustments to the springs as well. I greased up all the bearings and hinges and pivot points, and now the door opens and closes with ease with just one finger, and it's so much quieter too. Next item on the garage cleanup was the tools. I took a few minutes first online to see what other small garages had done to sort of organize their tool space, and I realized I wasn't really maximizing some of my wall space. First thing I did was take a few large screws and hung up some of the large open and box end wrenches that I had and put them on the left wall in like a xylophone, from largest to smallest, to kind of get those out of the way. Then I got an idea to head out to IKEA, which we have here in New Jersey. It's like a Scandinavian company, I think. We've had a bunch of furniture from them over the years. And I got these black painted SCADAS panels, which are kind of like a pegboard. It's very versatile, and it's great for light and medium weight organization, which is good for me because I wasn't planning to hang anything too heavy on the wall. So I mounted 4 large SCADAS panels on the wall and then began to figure out how to mount my tools. I did pick up a few of the IKEA shelves and hooks and baskets that go onto the SCADAS panels, but what I really needed was a few specific holders for things like my power drills and screw guns. Luckily, I recently acquired a used 3D printer, so I immediately began downloading files for some brackets for my own tools. It's fun. There's been a bunch of websites that you can go through and see what else people have got that they've made and have designed, and you can download it for free and print them out. I began downloading the files, and it worked out for the most part for my screw guns and batteries and chargers, but I needed to do a bit of research and find a little creativity to print up brackets for the palm sander and grinder and a couple of the other tools, adapters for things that I wanted, like an adapter for the shop vac to hook to the sanders or to the cutoff tools. So I worked that all out and began to clear off my workbench, and then it occurred to me that the galvanized steel top on the workbench, which was covered with spilled paint from years of abuse, that really needed to be replaced or at least recovered. I looked around, however, at the cost of steel and thought there must be a way I could upcycle something. Then I came across a deal on Facebook Marketplace that I could not pass up. It was a 30-inch by 60-inch steel coffee table. It had 2 layers, and it was constructed of steel with an angle iron frame, and it was all for the low cost of $30. Best of all, it was only 5 minutes away. So I contacted the seller, went out and picked up the table, which was quite heavy, and brought it back to the garage and immediately began dissecting it. I cut the 2 layers of steel, the top layer and the bottom shelf. I cut them apart and discarded all the pieces I didn't need. And then I wanted to make a nice long cut in the 60-inch side to narrow it down to recover my current workbench. And I wanted to make this cut, make sure it was real nice and straight. So I had seen the tool online and took a screenshot. And this was like a few months ago when I saw this. It was basically a cutoff wheel mounted to sort of like a skate that rode along a piece of 1x1 square steel. The small skate or little truck, it was fixed to this rail so you could make a long straight cut. So you put the metal underneath and you kind of ran this thing over top of it. I thought, sure, I could make something like this. So I put everything else in the garage aside for then and went out to the local skateboard shop to find some skateboard bearings and began to fabricate my own rail cutting system. It took a few days to teach myself CAD, which is computer-aided design, and I wanted to set out a plan and some measurements and I wasn't just going to be sketching things up on a yellow pad for this project. So, and I had the time, that I'm retired, so I figured I could do this. So I set out to design the rail system to be used with my angle grinder and the cutoff wheel. But then I also sort of revised everything so that I could use my plasma cutter as well. I created a new part from 2 existing designs in the CAD program and printed out a torch holder with my 3D printer. I also printed out some large handles for all the screw adjustment on the 3D printer as well. And not only does the design look pretty cool, if I must say, but it also works very well. I used the plasma torch on one piece of the steel table, and then I used the cutoff wheel on another piece. Both worked about the same. The plasma cutter is a little temperamental, and I would say that the cutoff wheel makes a bigger mess with the dust and the dirt that it throws off. But in the end, I cut the steel table down into 2 new benchtop covers. The first cover goes over my existing workbench, and the second one covers a new workbench top that I made for my drill press and my 6-inch grinder, both of which are now firmly mounted, not like they were just sitting on the old workbench, not really properly mounted and bolted down. I took angle iron from the tables and created the border around both the tables. And after I was done, it took 2 days to clean up all the mess and dust everything off, including giving Wilson a bath. But in all, it was probably a month of work to clean up and finish the garage organization project, but happy to have it done. So what else have I been doing this winter, you ask? Well, I've been building mini VW buses. And I know that sounds strange, but let me explain. On my shelf here in my office, in my house, I have a bunch of Volkswagen bus toys, things that I picked up over the years. Some are a little larger, some are a little smaller, and some are very small. Now, I have this one particular VW bus model, toy, I guess it is a toy or a sculpture, that I am particularly fond of because of its miniature size. It's only about 1 inch long and about 3/4 of an inch in height. And it's an 11-window splitty, just like Wilson. My friend Renee at my old job gave it to me, and I decided to see if I could replicate it. So I made a silicone mold to start with, and then actually I made 2 more silicone molds as well. And now I could cast 3 of these buses at one time. I then found a casting material that I liked at the local hobby store that's similar to plaster but a lot harder. And I started to make cast of my own small little VW buses. After I remove each bus from the mold, which takes about 45 minutes to pour and cure, I set it aside to dry for about 24 hours, and then I can take my acrylic paint and start painting the buses. Now, the hardest buses to paint are the 2-tone ones, because I've got to do the white on the top and then the color on the bottom. So I've done about half of the buses with that paint design, and the rest are just solid in one color. I've got buses now in just about every color imaginable: white, black, red, green, blue, yellow, pink, purple, just about anything I had paint for, and even mixed up some custom colors as well. But painting the bus is only the beginning, because once the paint on the body is dry, I have to paint the tiny tires, and then the even smaller wheels, and even smaller windows, and the front and rear bumpers, and the taillights and the headlights, with the very small paintbrushes and or toothpicks. So usually I have to stand there. I'm doing this in my kitchen at the bar, and I have to stand up and hold my breath in order to keep my hands steady enough to do the detailed paint work. In all, it probably takes a few hours for each bus to be created. But I've made probably over 100 of these miniature buses. I actually stopped counted in the 90s, so probably 100, let's just say. A few of the buses even have some small magnets that are recessed and epoxied into the bottom as a special touch, and I can put them like anywhere, on the fridge, on Wilson. Then I thought I would order some special glow-in-the-dark powder from a company in Texas and create my own paint, which I applied with a toothpick as well to the white painted headlights. Some of the buses received a green glow-in-the-dark treatment to the headlights, and some are blue. The paint is invisible. It only glows at night after you've applied some light to it. So you can't really see it. But it's really neat when they do glow in the dark. So I really like the blue, but the green definitely glows the best, better than the blue. I even painted a few of the buses completely with the fluorescent glow-in-the-dark paint. But the little microns of powder, the glow powder in the paint, are so thick and chunky that it almost takes away some of the detail of the bus casting and gives the bus a stucco-like finish that I'm not really crazy about. When all the paint's finished, they get a few coats of clear spray paint to protect them. And we'll see how they glow as I plan to put them outside. So now there's a collection of mini buses in my office on my shelf here. But the rest of they're here with my bus toys. But most of the buses that I made are in a box with Wilson, ready to be given out at the next cruise night or car show. My plan all along was to create gifts to give to kids or, bus enthusiasts when they always gravitate towards Wilson and come up and talk to me. And, I love this bus is so cool. And, they're always talking to me about, their experiences with Volkswagen buses. And, I usually give out magnets or stickers. I like to, give away a little something if you come up and say that you like the bus. So this year I'm going to give away my little mini buses. So I know that my grandkids have the first two castings I made, and they absolutely love them. The 2-year-old rarely goes anywhere without her, we call it her emotional support bus, clenched in her little fist. I also mailed an early prototype out to my sister, though unfortunately she didn't get the glow-in-the-dark headlight treatment. So I'll have to see if I can get it back and touch up the headlights for her. If you'd like a tiny VW bus of your very own, well, all you have to do is meet me at a show and ask me for one. Supplies are, however, limited. Well, that about does it for this episode of Wilson the VW Bus Podcast. On the next and final episode of Season 5, I plan to tell you about the new LED headlight project that I have in store for Wilson. I'm glad that you stuck around with me today, and I hope to catch you next time. Peace.